Hello and welcome to another episode of the SEO Unplugged podcast. I'm your host Itamar Blauer, and today I'm joined with Greta Koivikko, who is the SEO executive at Blauer SEO. Greta, good to see you. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me, Itamar. How are you?
Pleasure. Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. And in this episode, we're going to talk about something that, well, you've done research around this topic of networking and SEO. So, right off the bat, can you talk me through and talk the audience through what that research was about, why you did it, and explaining some of the key things that you found? Because I think this topic is absolutely fascinating. So, yeah, why don't you go and explain maybe the sort of from the beginning, sort of what made you want to,
Mm.
start looking into this topic?
Um, well, it all kind of started during my first months at Blue Array. I, within quite a short period of time, I went to quite a few SEO events around the UK, Women in Tech SEO, our own London SEO meetups, and after those events, a couple of colleagues came up to me and just said, like, "Oh, you seem to be quite natural at networking. Like, how do you do it? Or like, you get along with people very well." And I was just like, I don't know. I suppose it just happens. I haven't thought about it any more than that. But then I started thinking about it, and I ended up doing a little company internal kind of learning. We have these like weekly learning sessions where employees can talk about a topic they're interested in. So I did a learning session about networking skills for SEOs, and it went really well. So I got quite into it, and I launched a survey to find out how SEOs actually feel about networking, whether it's important or not, and how they feel about their own networking skills. And it took off quite nicely. I'm close to 200 replies now. So I then ended up pitching it for Brighton SEO for autumn 2022 and got accepted. So yeah, it all kind of happened accidentally that I became very interested in networking.
Hmm. Awesome. So you say almost 200 responses. And so what were the kind of mix of that? So it's all SEOs, but like what kind of mix did you have? Let's say if it's in-house SEOs versus maybe agency side SEOs or freelancers, consultants. What was that kind of mix that you had there of responses?
Well, I luckily managed to get quite a diverse pool of replies. So it's almost equally divided between in-houses and agency side and freelancers, a bit more in-house and agency people, but a good amount of freelancers as well. And then another, I try to keep it as anonymous as possible, but beside asking about the work kind of workplace, whether it's in-house or an agency, I also asked about generally how long one's been in the industry for, whether it's less than a year, 1 to 3 years, kind of 3 to 5 years, and then over 10 years. So I'm just looking at the graphs here I've created to illustrate the data for my talk. So it's nice and equal. So I think hopefully that makes it more applicable.
Hmm. Okay, well that's good. I mean, if it's at least representative across the whole board of different types of people who are working in the industry in different sort of, let's say, setups, as we could call it.
Mm.
So in that sense, what are some of the things that you were asking, and what, if you're happy to share, like what were some of the sort of key results or things that stood out to you in terms of like how people feel about networking and SEO?
Well, I think some of the most interesting findings were that a majority, nearly 70% of SEOs who responded to my survey think that networking is either important or very important for people working in the industry. But in contrast to that, nearly 65% of the responders feel insecure about their networking skills. So those two numbers don't really meet. And I also asked people to um, choose bit on a scale of 1 to 5 how confident or not confident they are about their own networking skills. So there was also a lot of difference in those answers depending on if the responders work in-house or in an agency. So it seemed that freelancers are more confident about their skills. And to my surprise, the least confident about their skills are people working in agencies. I would have expected it to be people working in-house, but that was quite interesting to see.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I would have thought the same. I'd imagine, in terms of these setups, the people
Mm,
who are going to be used to having to speak to lots of different people and parties and stakeholders would be your freelancers, consultants, and agency side, who like people in agencies, SEOs that run or work on multiple different types of accounts and businesses. So that is quite interesting, and I think it's also interesting that you're saying that most people felt insecure about networking, although like most people found it to be important or very important. So let's get your perspective on this. So why do you think networking is so important in SEO?
Well, I think it can be quite vital to career growth, whether it's changing jobs or just establishing your so-called personal brand. So that's one aspect to it. Then also skills-wise, SEO is such a multifaceted thing that you can never learn it all. You easily become specialized in one thing. So knowing the other SEOs around you can really broaden your horizons about SEO when you surround yourself with individuals who may be specialized in other aspects of SEO than you are.
hmm Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, like you're saying, because SEO is there's so much in it that it's like, even when it comes to doing the job, being an SEO, we've got people who are very strong on the technical side. We've got people who are very strong on the content side, on the, let's say, on link building side, right? So we've got all of these areas. And
Mm,
if you are, let's say, networking isn't your strong suit and you're maybe having difficulties in one area that you're working on, no matter what your setup is. So if you're doing work for a website or business, then it's like, if you're having a difficult time, talking to other people who are good at that and can help you, that's obviously going to hinder your ability to do the work as best as you can, or it might also hinder the ability for you to learn and pick up of
mm,
new skills that you can learn from other people by talking to them, right? So, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure that in itself is, networking. Yeah, of course, people say networking is important for the reasons that you mentioned before, like career prospects, etc. But even when it comes to actually doing SEO work, it can be very invaluable. I myself have learned a lot from talking with other SEOs about their experiences, and they've given me advice. So it's like, yeah, 100% very important things. But
mm.
what is it that you think then, in terms of, obstacles or specific reasons why people might be a bit insecure about networking and SEO? Do you have could you shed some light maybe on what are some potential reasons why people might feel insecure about networking?
Well, I think something that I felt sometimes myself, but that also came up in my survey, is that there's kind of a perception that networking, it's only for senior employees and the C-suite. So if you're a bit newer to the industry like myself, or just not the loudest person in the room, you can feel like, what have you got to give? Why would people be interested in talking to you? So I think that's something that I've become quite passionate about, how networking is very important, especially for us new to the industry, how knowing the right people can help you grow your skills. And I think one thing I read that was quite interesting is that if you're, for example, very junior yourself, and you're going to a networking event or somewhere where you'll be meeting a lot of industry people and you feel a bit insecure on what you have to give, it's actually quite common nowadays within different digital marketing niches such as SEO to have a mentorship schemes of some kind. For example, Ari Jabuali has just launched the new edition of Women in Tech SEO mentorships. And I think that's something that quite a few senior SEOs might be interested in, even even if it's not part of an official mentorship scheme, but just, being able to train the new generation of SEOs and share your best tips that you've learned over the years. So that's something that more junior SEOs have to give. You are the, or we are the, the blank slates, or who have maybe fresh vision, lots of ideas, but not so much of the practical experience. So that's one thing that newer SEOs have to give.
Yeah, absolutely. And the point that you're saying as well about, if somebody is new to the industry, then of course it can feel quite daunting. It can feel quite intimidating to network with other people, especially because like we were saying before, SEO is such a big field where there's so much to know about, there's so much to learn and so much to tinker with, that it's like if you're starting out and you've only been at it for several months, it's like, a lot of people, yeah, as
Mhm.
based on the results that you've got, a lot of people might not be ready for that yet. And of course, I didn't know the context of, where from those results, how many of those people who said that they felt a bit insecure, how long they've been doing SEO for. Did you find that it was the case that people who hadn't done SEO for a long time, let's say a few years or more, if they've done less than that, then they were the ones that were predominantly saying that they were feeling insecure about networking in SEO?
There was a bit of that, but I think what surprised me a bit was that the insecurity was seen among all the responders, or I mean, majority of the responders, even among those who've been doing SEO for 5+, even 10+ years. But there was more of the insecurity around your own networking skills around the more junior responders.
Okay, so well, that's interesting, because then it's like, from what you found, it's across the board. Doesn't matter really how long people have been in the industry. There's still a lot of people in SEO who do find it a struggle, or they struggle with networking within the industry. So if we take that and we, let's try and help people out, right? So Greta, what are your top tips for networking within the SEO industries, whether that's to other SEOs or if it's to, let's say, clients or prospective clients? So what would be your best tips for improving your networking within SEO?
Well, before getting started with the more practical skills, I think what's really helped myself is kind of changing the way I think about networking. Because, if you think about traditional networking, you might think of, walking into a room of people in suits, who look very important, and everybody is trying to get something out of each other, almost take advantage of the others. But if you think about it the other way, instead of networking being something you need from someone, if you flip it around and think about how you can fulfill those other people's needs, whether they are looking for just someone to chat in an event, or a new employee, new ideas, new SEO provider. So looking at it the other way has helped me feel a bit less insecure, kind of not focusing, what do I want out of this event? What do I want out of talking to these people? More like, what can I give to them? So I think that makes it feel, I'm personally not the most salesy person. So I think that helps me approach networking in a bit more natural way. It doesn't feel so calculated.
But then what if we take the case of, for example, if somebody is new to the industry, they might feel that they don't have much to give to the other party. So how would you sort of overcome that? Let's say you're quite new to the industry, and what are some tips you can give to somebody who's new, who wants to start networking with people who might not, like, from the approach that you've said, they might not feel like they've got anything maybe like practical in terms of like SEO to be able to give or help the other person. So what are some ways that sort of they can sort of come get their foot in the door, and start networking and feel good, and feel like they're, happy about their approach, and that they're actually, yeah, happy with what they're doing?
Well, I think it comes down to like identifying people's needs in different situations. They might be someone, a big name as a networking event, who's looking for a, I don't know, software as a service provider. And then there's another person who's just looking for someone to chat to because they are there by themselves and they feel a bit insecure too. So kind of thinking about the different needs, and even if you kind of want to at the end fulfill a bigger need, maybe find a new client or find a new job, but it all starts with fulfilling the smaller needs, so you can't go straight to the deep end. So I think especially if you're new to the industry, not really know people, just being a nice person, striking up conversations, even if they're not strictly about SEO, that makes you more approachable. And I think what's always worked quite well for me, especially when I went to my first Brighton SEO all by myself, no other person from my back then job came, was trying to find other loners. If you often think of who to approach in a room, you may be looking for people who look like they might have something in common with you. So that's often a good way to strike up a conversation. It's like, oh, you're here by yourself too. How did you get here? What's your background?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. And that's a very, very good thing to do. And something that I want to get into related to that is obviously this is in an offline setting, right? This is actually physically going to meetups and networking in person. So what advice would you have for people who aren't able to do that for whatever reason? And I guess because SEO, like there's SEOs from all around the world, not everyone's going to be able to mingle and meet up with everyone physically. So how would you approach doing this sort of thing online?
Well, I think Twitter's where you find a lot of SEOs. LinkedIn tends to be more business minded. Obviously, you can have meaningful conversations there as well, but I feel like Twitter's worked best for me. So, actively taking part in conversations, whether it's about SEO or about where do you want a holiday this summer, kind of getting your name out there. Because then, if you at some point go to a physical event, SEO is still such a small industry, so you're bound to run into someone you know from Twitter, and that can be a way to start a conversation. But I think, yeah, even though I'm focusing more on the physical side of networking, I think um, the power of Twitter, whether it's on the comment section or in the DMs, can't be overlooked. And also virtual meetups, if you, for example, live a bit further away. Or I've personally participated in some Finnish SEO meetups online because I'm originally from Finland, but I've only started doing SEO once I moved to the UK. But I kind of wanted to get to know some of my Finnish colleagues a bit better, just in case I ever want to relocate back there, because it's still very much, I mean, if SEO is a small industry in the UK, it's so much smaller in Finland. So SEO industry in Finland, everyone knows each other. So I've kind of tried to get into it a bit as well, just to keep that door open. So I think virtual meetups are really valuable as well.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. So there are options, and I guess that's the important thing to note that, it doesn't matter if it's, if you can go travel somewhere, or if you can't, there are going to be ways for you to be able to network with people. So Greta, I want to finish on just kind of, well, I don't want to call it like a kind of hot desk, hot seat thing where it's like,
Mhm.
I just like quick fire sort of questions, but I just want to know from you, genuinely from your experience, what have you preferred to be like the best way to network with people in what kind of setting, whether that's online or offline? And also just what is your just top tip if anybody wants to, finish listening to this and be able to improve their ability to network in the SEO industry, what would that tip be?
I think my top tip is preparation. Don't be afraid of doing some research beforehand. It's not fake or calculated. We're all there for a reason, and the reason is to network. So, for me, for example, always before I go to Brighton SEO, I try to go through some of my connections on LinkedIn and Twitter and see who else is going to be there at the same event or who I think might be attending. And then I think about those people, and I might go through mentally questions such as, is there someone I'd like to meet? Is there someone I'd like to introduce to another person? Is there someone who I'd like to hire me, or is there someone who could benefit from my services? And then make either a mental or physical list of those people you'd like to approach at an event. Like, that's what I do. I don't know if it's a bit of a mechanical approach, but it's really worked for me. I think I've sometimes, when there's been someone I've really wanted to meet, I've even taken a sneaky screenshot of their LinkedIn profile so I'd recognize them there easier. And I think my hot tip is looking at the attendees list at Brighton SEO app before Brighton SEO, because that's where you can look at people by companies and by names. So let's say you're interested to learn about a certain company, maybe you even want to apply for a job there in the future. So take a look if some people from that company will be at Brighton SEO, and then you can maybe go talk to them. So I think
Yeah, that
preparation's my best key. Then you can feel more confident about starting conversations.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously a lot of yeah, shout out to Brighton SEO, which is an awesome conference. I thoroughly enjoy it myself. And yeah, preparation definitely is key for everything, right? I mean, if you what's the saying? If you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail, or something like that.
Yeah, I
So
think so.
that's what they always say. But if we apply it in this scenario, of course, it's much better if you do prep in advance, because then you kind of, whether it's mechanical or not, you still have a much better idea of kind of what you're going in there for, the people specifically that you might want to talk to. But Greta, and finally, last question. So I take it that you prefer the offline sort of networking in SEO, right? What is your favorite sort of setup?
I do like going to a lot of industry events and meetups to do the physical mingling, especially after COVID. And also, I work remotely myself, so I'm on Google calls all day. So I think the change from physical meetups is what I like. But I've also really enjoyed all online events I've attended, so they shouldn't be overlooked.
Awesome. Well, that's great. I think that pretty much wraps it up. So, Greta, thanks so much for joining me today. And just really quick, how can people find you if they want to network with you, right? Because that's what we've been talking about in this episode. To just find you, ask any questions. Where can people find you?
Um, I've become quite more active on Twitter lately, so let me just double check my handle. Yeah, it's her Gretaness, kind of a wordplay from her greatness, but her Gretaness.
I never noticed that. That's wow. That's good. And thanks
Yeah,
for telling me that. Now I get it.
yeah, I think it sounds much better in my head, but it's quite a unique handle. So yeah, her Gretaness on Twitter, and then Greta Koivikko on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today, and to all the listeners out there as well. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Hey, you've reached the end of this video, but don't worry, there's plenty more great content that you can watch right now. All you have to do is click one of the two video links on the left side of the screen. And also, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell to never miss out on future uploads.